Have you ever sent a voice message without thinking about it? You tap a button, speak a few words, and within seconds your voice travels across cities, countries, even oceans. It feels so natural that you almost never stop to wonder about it. But now imagine something strange. Imagine that tomorrow morning you wake up and nobody can speak. Not your families, not the people on television, not even you. The sounds are still there. You can laugh, you can cry, you can shout. But words are gone. No names, no stories, no questions. No explanations, just noises. How long would it take before your entire world began to fall apart? At first, it might seem like a simple inconvenience. You could point at things, you could wave your hands, you could make gestures. But then you would need to explain where food is hidden. You would need to warn someone about danger waiting beyond the trees. You would need to tell a child something that happened yesterday, or describe a place that exists only in your memory. Suddenly, pointing would no longer be enough, and that raises one of the greatest mysteries in human history. If every child learns language from someone else, who taught the first humans how to speak? Where did the very first words come from? Because there was never a classroom in the Ice Age. There were no teachers, no books, no dictionaries, and yet somehow, over thousands of generations, a species of primates transformed simple sounds into the most powerful tool ever created, a tool capable of building civilizations, creating religions, sharing knowledge, planning wars, writing poetry, inventing science, and eventually allowing billions of strangers to communicate across the planet. Most people imagine that language appeared suddenly, as if one day our ancestors simply started talking. But the real story is far more surprising. According to anthropology, archaeology, genetics, and evolutionary biology, language was not invented in a single moment. It was built piece by piece, gesture by gesture, sound by sound, across a journey so long that it stretches back hundreds of thousands of years. And the strangest part? The ability you are using right now to understand these words may have begun long before the first true word was ever spoken. To understand how humans learned to talk, we first have to travel back to a time when nobody could. You might imagine that language began when humans became intelligent enough to invent words. It sounds reasonable. After all, words seem like the natural product of a bigger brain. More intelligence, more thinking, more language. But archaeologists, anthropologists, and evolutionary scientists believe the story was far more complicated than that. In fact, one of the most common beliefs about human language may be completely wrong. Most people picture our ancestors as silent creatures for hundreds of thousands of years, suddenly discovering speech like someone flipping on a light switch. One day, no language. The next day, conversation. But evolution almost never works that way. Feathers existed before birds could fly. Legs existed before animals walked onto land. And language may have existed in pieces long before the first true sentence was ever spoken. To understand why, imagine yourself standing on an African grassland several million years ago. You are not fully human, but you are not a chimpanzee either. You live in a small group. You search for food together. You watch for predators together. You raise children together. And every day your survival depends on communication. If danger appears behind the tall grass, you need a way to warn others. If food is discovered near a river, you need a way to attract attention. If a child wanders too far, you need a way to call them back. The problem is that sounds alone can only do so much. Many animals already communicate. Birds communicate. Wolves communicate. Dolphins communicate. Even monkeys have surprisingly sophisticated alarm calls. Some species can produce different sounds for different threats. One call may mean an eagle overhead. Another may mean a snake nearby. Another may signal a predator approaching through the bushes. To us, these sounds may seem simple, but to the animals hearing them, they carry real information. For a long time, scientists wondered whether human language was simply a more advanced version of the same system. A larger vocabulary, a larger brain, a few extra sounds, case closed. But then researchers noticed something extraordinary. Human language can do something that animal communication appears unable to do. You can talk about things that are not here. You can discuss tomorrow. You can describe yesterday. You can imagine places you have never visited. You can invent stories about people who never existed. You can even think about your own thoughts. A monkey can warn others about a leopard, but as far as we know, it cannot gather its group around a fire and tell a story about the leopard it saw last week. That difference may seem small, yet it changes everything, because the moment communication escapes the present moment, knowledge can begin to accumulate. Experiences can be shared, lessons can survive, ideas can travel from one generation to the next, and suddenly, evolution is no longer working only through genes, it is working through information. But this creates an even bigger mystery. If language did not suddenly appear, if it was not simply a smarter version of animal calls, then what happened in between? How did a species of primates cross the invisible line separating sounds from symbols and symbols from stories? That question takes us to the real challenge our ancestors faced. And surprisingly, the answer may have started not with words at all, but with a problem so important that without solving it, humanity might never have existed. That question takes us to the real challenge our ancestors faced. And surprisingly, the answer may have started not with words at all, but with a problem so important that without solving it, humanity might never have existed. Imagine yourself living around 200,000 years ago. The world around you is becoming more complicated. Your ancestors are no longer surviving in tiny groups scattered across the landscape. Groups are growing. Journeys are becoming longer, tools are becoming more sophisticated, and survival is becoming less about individual strength and more about cooperation. At first glance, that might sound like an advantage. More people means more eyes watching for danger, more hands gathering food, more hunters tracking prey, but larger groups create a new problem, a problem that no claw, tooth, or muscle can solve: information. Imagine you discover a water source hidden beyond a distant ridge. How do you tell others where it is? You can point, but only if they can see the ridge. Imagine you encounter a dangerous predator near a river several miles away. How do you explain what happened after everyone returns to camp? A warning call is not enough. The danger is no longer present. The river is no longer visible. The event exists only inside your memory, and memory trapped inside one brain is almost useless to a community. This was the challenge, not simply making sounds, but transferring knowledge from one mind to another. Because knowledge became the most valuable resource our ancestors possessed. A sharp stone tool could break, a shelter could collapse, a fire could go out, but knowledge could keep an entire group alive. Knowledge about migration routes, knowledge about edible plants, knowledge about changing seasons, knowledge about where predators hunted and where prey gathered. Every generation was learning lessons that could mean the difference between survival and extinction. The problem was that each generation also risked losing those lessons. Imagine spending years discovering which berries are safe to eat, then dying before passing that information on. The next generation would have to start over, again and again and again. Evolution through genes is powerful, but it is incredibly slow. A useful mutation may take thousands of generations to spread. Human groups needed something much faster. They needed a way to preserve experience, to store information, to transfer ideas. In a sense, they needed a biological version of cloud storage long before computers existed, and this may have become one of the greatest survival pressures in human evolution. Scientists often point out that humans are not the fastest animals. We are not the strongest. We do not have the sharpest teeth. We do not have the thickest fur. What we possess is shared knowledge, the ability for one person to learn something and hundreds of others to benefit from it. But that ability depends on communication. Without it, every individual is forced to learn almost everything from personal experience. And personal experience is a dangerous teacher, especially in prehistoric landscapes where mistakes could carry severe consequences. A single misunderstanding could mean losing a hunting opportunity. A single forgotten lesson could mean wandering into danger. A single piece of missing information could affect an entire group. The larger human communities became, the more serious this problem grew. And that may be why simple calls and gestures eventually stopped being enough. Our ancestors were facing a challenge unlike anything their primate relatives had ever encountered. They needed a way to communicate things they could not see, things they could not touch, things that existed only in memory and imagination. And solving that challenge may have changed the course of human history forever. But here is the fascinating part. The first solution may not have involved speaking at all, because before language became something you heard, it may have been something you saw. Because before language became something you heard, it may have been something you saw. Imagine yourself standing beside a small group at the edge of a grassland. The sun is setting. A hunting party has returned. One of the hunters suddenly points toward a distant hill. Then he imitates the movement of an animal. Others immediately understand. No words are spoken, yet information has been shared. This idea has led many scientists to propose a fascinating possibility. Before humans developed spoken language, our ancestors may have relied heavily on gestures, hands, facial expressions, body movements. In other words, the earliest language may have looked more like acting than talking, and in some ways you still do this today. Even when speaking on the phone where nobody can see you, you probably move your hands, you point, you shrug, you raise your eyebrows. These behaviors are so deeply connected to communication that they often happen automatically. But gestures had a serious limitation. They only worked when people could see each other. A warning gesture was useless in the dark. A signal could not travel through dense vegetation, and information disappeared the moment someone looked away. As human groups expanded, a better solution was needed, and that solution may have emerged from sounds. At first, those sounds were probably simple. A grunt, a click, a short vocal signal paired with a gesture. Perhaps a particular sound always accompanied a specific action. Over time, the sound itself may have started carrying meaning. The gesture became less important, the sound became more important, and eventually, something remarkable happened. The signal stopped representing an action. It started representing an idea. That may not sound revolutionary, but it changed everything. Because the moment a sound becomes a symbol, the human mind gains an entirely new ability. Now you can refer to things that are not physically present. A river beyond the horizon, a herd seen yesterday, a child who wandered away. For the first time, information can travel independently of the object itself. But that was only the beginning, because once symbols exist, they can be combined. Imagine knowing a sound for water, another sound for danger, another sound for there. Suddenly, you no longer communicate isolated facts. You communicate relationships. Danger near water, water beyond the hill, food near the river. Simple combinations become more useful than any individual signal. And according to many researchers, this may have been one of the most important turning points in human history. Not because people learned more words, but because they learned how to connect them. Yet communication was still facing another obstacle, one that existed inside the human body itself. Having ideas is one thing. Expressing them clearly is another, and this is where evolution may have begun reshaping something surprisingly important. Your throat, your tongue, your mouth. Compared with other primates, humans possess an unusual vocal anatomy. Over hundreds of thousands of years, subtle changes appear to have given our ancestors greater control over the sounds they could produce. A wider range of vowels, more precise consonants, more distinct vocal patterns. And here is the strange part. These changes may have come with a cost. Humans are far more vulnerable to choking than most other mammals. The very anatomy that helps you speak also creates risks. In other words, evolution may have traded some degree of safety for better communication. That sounds like a terrible bargain. Unless communication was so valuable that it increased survival more than the risk it created. And evidence suggests it did. A group that could share information effectively could coordinate hunts, protect children, avoid hazards, pass knowledge across generations. Communication was becoming a survival technology. But there was still one more problem. Even if the body could produce complex sounds, the brain had to understand them. And this is where the story becomes even more extraordinary. Because language was not just changing mouths and throats, it was transforming the human mind itself. And the next breakthrough may have allowed our ancestors to do something no other species had ever mastered. Tell stories. And the next breakthrough may have allowed our ancestors to do something no other species had ever mastered. Tell stories. At first, that may not sound particularly important. Stories are entertainment, right? Something you watch before bed, something you stream on your phone, something you listen to on a long drive. But for your ancestors, stories may have been one of the most powerful survival tools ever created. Imagine sitting beside a fire tens of thousands of years ago. The hunt is over, darkness surrounds the camp, children sit close to the adults, and someone begins describing an event that happened many days earlier. A dangerous animal near a river, a successful hunting strategy, a distant valley rich with food. For the first time, experience is no longer limited to the people who lived through it. Knowledge begins moving between minds. A child can learn from events they never witnessed. A hunter can benefit from lessons learned years before they were born. This changes the rules of evolution. Instead of every generation starting from scratch, information starts accumulating. Knowledge becomes an inheritance, and unlike genes, knowledge can spread almost instantly. But there was another advantage, one that may have been even more important. Stories help groups cooperate. Imagine trying to organize 50 people, or 100. Everyone has different needs, different goals, different fears. Without a shared understanding of the world, large groups tend to fall apart. Yet humans somehow learn to cooperate on a scale unmatched by any other animal. Anthropologists believe language played a crucial role in making that possible, not just because it allowed information to spread, but because it allowed people to share ideas, ideas about family, ideas about rules, ideas about trust, ideas about who belonged to the group, and eventually, ideas about things nobody could see at all. Myths, traditions, beliefs, symbols. Entire communities could now be connected by stories existing only in human minds. That ability may seem ordinary because you live with it every day, but it is one of the strangest powers humans possess. You can care about a nation you have never seen in its entirety. You can follow laws written by people long dead. You can feel loyalty toward millions of strangers, all because of shared stories. Many researchers believe this ability helped humans expand across continents. When groups could communicate effectively, they could cooperate more effectively. When they cooperated more effectively, they became more adaptable, and adaptability became humanity's greatest advantage. But there is something even more fascinating. The same abilities that helped your ancestors survive are still shaping your life today. Every text message you send, every conversation you have, every podcast you listen to, every movie you watch, every book you read, all of it traces back to the same ancient breakthrough. The moment sounds stopped being simple signals and became carriers of meaning. In a way, your smartphone is doing exactly what a campfire storyteller once did, transferring information from one human mind to another. The technology is different, the goal is the same, and perhaps that is why language remains one of the most extraordinary inventions in human history. Except there is one detail that many people never stop to consider. Language was never truly invented. No single person created it. No genius designed it. No tribe woke up one morning and decided to start speaking. Instead, language emerged from countless generations solving the same problem. How do you place a thought inside someone else's mind? And the answer they discovered changed the future of our species forever. Right now, as you listen to these words, millions of neurons inside your brain are transforming sounds into meaning. You understand ideas that exist nowhere in the physical world. You can imagine places you have never visited, people who never existed, moments that happened thousands of years before you were born. It feels effortless, but it is the result of one of the longest evolutionary journeys in human history. When you speak to a friend, send a text message, tell a joke, explain a memory, or share a dream, you are using an ability that countless generations helped build. An ability shaped by hunters around campfires, parents teaching children, travelers sharing knowledge, communities passing stories from one generation to the next. No single person invented language. Instead, it emerged from millions of small moments. A gesture that worked, a sound that carried meaning, a story that helped someone survive, a lesson that was remembered instead of forgotten. Over thousands of generations, those moments accumulated until they became something extraordinary. The ability to place a thought inside another human mind. And perhaps that is what makes language so remarkable. It is not merely a tool for communication. It is a bridge between consciousnesses. Without it, every human life would begin and end trapped inside a single brain. With it, knowledge can outlive the people who discover it. Ideas can travel across continents. Wisdom can survive centuries, and strangers separated by oceans can share the same thought. The next time you speak a sentence, consider how unlikely that ability truly is. Your words are not just sounds. They are the descendants of countless forgotten conversations stretching back into prehistory. Every language on Earth is a living fossil, a record of millions of minds connected across time. And perhaps the greatest achievement of our ancestors was not learning how to make tools, control fire, or cross entire continents. Perhaps it was learning how to share what existed inside their minds. Because the moment humans learned to truly communicate, they stopped surviving only as individuals. They began surviving as a collective memory. A species connected not only by genes, but by ideas. And in many ways, that ancient experiment is still continuing today. Every conversation you have becomes part of it. Every story you tell keeps it alive. And every word you speak carries the legacy of a journey that began long before history itself. If you enjoyed exploring the deep history of humanity and want to discover more incredible stories about our ancestors, evolution, survival, and the hidden origins of the modern world, be sure to subscribe to the channel and join us for the next journey. Until then, remember this. Long before humans learned to build civilizations, they learned something even more powerful: how to understand one another. Before you go, take a moment to subscribe to Duck Psychology, because every video on this channel is another step backward through time toward the people whose choices, struggles, and discoveries made your life possible. And the deeper you look into the past, the more you begin to understand yourself. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next journey into humanity's forgotten past.